In this video, I'll show you some simple ways to add some battle damage to your minis. Hi everyone, and welcome to another brushstroke painting guide. So as you heard from the intro there, we're going to be looking at a few simple ways of adding some battle damage to your miniatures. So in a recent video I showed this Imperial Fist picture, and I've had a few people asking how I did the battle damage on the armour. So as it's really simple and easy to do, I thought I'd make a quick video and show you. Now before we begin, I think there's a few things I should mention which will help you get the most out of this video. And the first thing is going to be that the model part I'm using has already been painted. So if you'd like to know details on how I painted that flawless yellow, then please click this link above. I also get asked a lot about the paintbrushes I use. Now thanks to the awesome guys at Artis Opus, I now actually have a paintbrush set which has brushes in it which are specifically picked to match the brushes that I use in all of my paint guides. So if you'd like more details on that, then please do click this link above. And then finally, I have a video that I've made on the wet palette that I use because I get a lot of questions on that. So if you'd like to know more about the details on my wet palette, then please click the link above, or you'll find all the links in the description below. Okay then, let's dive in and start adding some damage. So as you can see, I've already painted this model part up, and the idea of this process is that you would paint your model first and then you can add the damage on top. So why would you want to paint damage and wear and tear on a model? Well, the idea really is it gives character and it sort of sets the scene. It's unrealistic really for these forces to be on a battlefield and to be completely pristine unless they've literally come out the forges of Mars. So by adding damage, you can add sort of interest and character to individual models whilst they still look uniform and army-like. And then honestly, one other reason is sometimes mistakes happen and the paint job doesn't go quite according to plan, and you can use battle damage to disguise these mistakes and still make a model look really good. So it's a really handy thing to know how to do. And all it takes are two colours. Now those colours will change depending on the thing that you're painting, but you need a shadow colour and you need a highlight colour. So in this particular case, I've shaded the model already with brown, so I'm going to need a shadow colour which is brown, and then the highlight is obviously going to be a pale yellow. If you were painting on blue, you'd probably use something like a dark grey as your shadow colour, and then whichever blue you used for your highlight, and so on. Now if you're ever in any doubt, then the two colours that you can pretty much not go wrong with are if you use a dark grey, so something like an Eshin grey or a Mechanicus grey, that works well, or brown. Now Rhinox hide is really good, and you'll see that in this video it actually doubles up like a bit of a rust effect as well. So if you're painting metals, then a dark brown like Rhinox hide can be really good as well. Okay, so I'm going to start off with adding some chipping first, and for this I'm actually not going to use a brush because I want the pattern to be random. So what I'm going to use is I'm going to use some packaging foam. This actually came in a blister pack, I think, for some models. It's the really soft foam that has really small sort of bubbles, and this is perfect for adding random chipping to your model. So all you need to do is just take yourself a piece off. About that size will do. And then you can sort of roll that up into a little ball-like pad that you can then use to make imprints onto your model. So now grab your chosen shadow colour. In my particular case, I'm going to use some Rhinox hide from Games Workshop. Then simply taking your foam, you just roll that back up into a little ball and then dip it into the paint. You don't want this to get too messy, so don't add too much to your sponge. Maybe a little bit more than that. Something about that is about right. Now grab yourself some paper towel, and taking your paint sponge, you're going to dab that onto the paper towel and remove pretty much all of the paint from the sponge. This is very much like when you're doing a dry brush and you're taking out all that paint from the brush. What you want to have is very little left in the sponge, so that it's just leaving a very small little imprint every time you press it. And then when you think you've pretty much done it, then you can just test it on the back of your hand. I've got a bit of yellow here, I can test it on that. Okay, that was good. So one final little check. What I don't want is to touch it to the model and to have too much paint on it. So what my thinking is I'm going to start with the edge at the front of the fist, like he's been punching things, and I'm going to build up the damage there. So I'm going to focus on that area where I'm going to build up most of the damage. I'm just going to apply it to the edge of that edge of the fist. So as you can see, as I've dabbed that along that edge, those dots have collected and it's sort of built up that sort of random pattern. And as you dab more and more, you'll build that up more and more and increase that sort of damage level. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good for that that leading edge now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep using the same sponge. I'm not going to load any more paint. I'm just going to pick out a few more edges. I'm going to stick to edges because I figure that's sort of where most of the wear and tear and chipping would happen. And this is very much a less is more. So you can always add more, but you can't take it away. So what I tend to do is I'll add a small bit, then look at it from a distance, add a little bit more, look at it from a distance, just to try and get that balance. You don't want to overdo this. Maybe a couple more in the middle bit here, just to add a few chips, and this edge under here maybe. It's very easy to overdo this, so I'm just going to take it easy. Right, I think I'm going to leave it at that for now, and I'm going to move on to being a bit more focused. So the sponge is great for doing random dots, but if you want to be a bit more focused on a particular area, that's where you come back in with your brush, and you take your shadow colour and thin it down a bit, and then you can paint in between those dots to make them bigger areas of damage. So on this leading edge here where he's been punching, it's going to fill in these gaps and make it just look a bit more damaged. Now the key here really is not to try and be too neat. In fact, actually, the rougher and the more random you can make it, the better. And you've thinned it down so you can still see some of that colour through. You're not looking to build up a solid colour. And you just sort of pick out those edges and sort of fill in those little dots and stuff just to make it look a bit more damaged. I don't want to go too crazy, so I'm going to leave it at that. But while I've still got my shadow colour on my brush, why don't we add a different type of damage and look at doing some scratches and grooves. This is very easy, so all you do is pick an area that you want to add your scratch and then just do a very light mark down. Try and keep it as straight and neat as possible. It also works on edges. You can just paint them in across the edge and like it's been chipped or scratched on the edge. Maybe even add another one here like it's parallel claws or something like that. And then just sort of work your way around and sort of add where you want those scratches to be. Again, I like to sort of add a scratch, keep it quite light, look at it from a distance, work out where I might want to put one. So I might look to maybe put one up here maybe, just coming down that side like it's deflected off his shoulder pad. So I'm just going to get a feel for where I want it to be, and then when I'm ready I can just put that down onto the model. Now you can keep these really light if you want, or you can always go back in and apply a second coat to each of these scratches and make them sort of really dark, and that'll give the impression that it's a deeper cut or gouge into the armour. And when you're happy with your scratches, it's time to add a highlight to them. So this is where you get your highlight colour. In my particular case, I'm going to use some White Star from Two Thin Coats. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to run a line underneath the one I've already painted, and that'll give the false impression of a highlight against the shadow, and it'll give the idea of a 3D groove. And then just repeat that highlight to all of your scratches and make them all look 3D too. Now, if you followed the How to Paint Yellow recipe, you'll know that my edge highlight wasn't in fact pure white. It was then tinted with a glaze of yellow. So for completeness on this video, I'm going to include that stage as well. So it's actually a thinned down version of Imperial Fist contrast paint, and it's thinned down 3:1 ratio with contrast medium. And then all I did was I applied that glaze across the white edge highlight to make that a nice bright yellow to match the rest of the paint scheme. But of course, if your highlight colour is straight from the pot, then you won't need to worry about this stage at all. As one final finishing touch to the battle damage, I thought it might be quite cool to show how you could show bare metal showing through. So for this, I'm going to use some graphite from Darkstar Miniatures. And all I'm going to do is, in the bigger areas of the chipping that we've done with the brown, I'm just going to paint it inside. So I want to keep some of the brown showing as an outline and then just paint a silver sort of random blob on the inside. And that should give the impression of the bare metal showing through. Now, before I start getting lots of angry messages in the comments, I do know that Space Marine armour is made of ceramite and not metal, and obviously wouldn't look metallic. So of course, if you would prefer, then you could paint this as like a pale grey or maybe like an off-white. But for me personally, when I've tried that before, it doesn't really look right. So I just quite like how it looks with metal. So rule of cool, really, I guess. But you do you. If you would prefer it to be ceramite, then by all means paint it as a soft grey instead. Okay, so I'm just going to add a couple of extra little bits with my sponge just to fill in some blank areas that look a bit plain, and then I'm going to call this Power Fist done. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you found it useful. If you have, then please do hit that like button and drop a comment below. If you'd like to see more of these recipe videos, then please let me know in the comments below what you'd like to see. Also, don't forget to check out the description below where I'm going to list all of the paints that I've used for this recipe and where you can get those at discount prices, so it's definitely worth checking out. And you'll also find all the links to the videos I mentioned earlier too. If you have enjoyed this video, then please do hit that subscribe button and don't forget to click the notification bell to be told whenever I post another video. Speaking of other videos, I'd love it if you stayed on the channel, so why not stay and check out another recipe video, or perhaps one of my other painting videos where you can see these recipes in action.